The Diary of a Nobody is an English comic novel written by the brothers George and Weedon. The Diary of a Nobody is an English comic novel written by the brothers George and Weedon Grossmith, with illustrations by the latter. It originated as an intermittent serial in Punch magazine in 1888-89 and first appeared in book form, with extended text and added illustrations, in 1892. The diary records the daily events in the lives of a London clerk, Charles Pooter, his wife Carrie, his son William Lupin, and numerous friends and acquaintances over a period of 15 months. About the writer. Walter Weedon Grossmith, the 9th of June 1854 to the 14th of June 1919, better known as Weedon Grossmith, was an English writer, painter, actor, and playwright best known as co-author of The Diary of a Nobody 1892 with his brother, music hall comedian and Gilbert and Sullivan star George Grossmith. Weedon Grossmith also illustrated The Diary of a Nobody to much acclaim. Grossmith trained as a painter, but was unable to make a living in that capacity and went on the stage largely for financial reasons. He was successful as an actor and as an impresario, and wrote several plays. As an actor, he specialized in comedy roles, and his typical characters, harassed and scheming, became so identified with him that the Weedon Grossmith part became a regular feature of the theater of his day. Before their collaboration on The Diary, the brothers each pursued successful careers on the stage. George originated 9 of the principal comedian roles in the Gilbert and Sullivan operas over 12 years from 1877 to 1889. He also established a national reputation as a piano sketch entertainer and wrote a large number of songs and comic pieces. Before embarking on his stage career, Weedon had worked as an artist and illustrator. The Diary was the brothers' only mature collaboration. Most of its humor derives from Charles Pooter's unconscious and unwarranted sense of his own importance, and the frequency with which this delusion is punctured by gaffes and minor social humiliations. In an era of rising expectations within the lower middle classes, the daily routines and modest ambitions described in the diary were instantly recognized by its contemporary readers, and provided later generations with a glimpse of the past that it became fashionable to imitate. Although its initial public reception was muted, the diary came to be recognized by critics as a classic work of humor, and it has never been out of print. It helped to establish a genre of humorous popular fiction based on lower or lower middle class aspirations, and was the forerunner of numerous fictitious diary novels in the later 20th century. The Diary has been the subject of several stage and screen adaptations, including Ken Russell's silent film, Treatment of 1964, a 4-part TV film scripted by Andrew Davies in 2007, and a widely praised stage version in 2011, in which an all-male cast of 3 played all the parts. The Diary of a Nobody was the work of George Grossmith and his brother Weedon Grossmith, the sons of a court reporter and part-time stage entertainer, also named George. The younger George followed his father, first as a reporter and later on the stage. The 7 years younger Weedon studied at the West London School of Art and had some success as a portrait painter before becoming a comic actor. The brothers were fascinated with the stage at an early age. In 1864, at 17 and 10, they hosted a complex program of musical and dramatic entertainment in their parents' garden at Haverstock Hill. This included a 20-minute burlesque version of Hamlet, in which George played the title role. Weedon was Ophelia. 2. By 1877 the younger George Grossmith had established himself as a comic piano sketch entertainer in provincial institutes and literary societies. In that year he was seen by Arthur Sullivan and, separately, by W. S. Gilbert, in performances of their one-act comic opera Trial by Jury. Impressed, they engaged him to play the comic lead in their new, full-length work, The Sorcerer. 3 Thereafter, Grossmith created the leading comic role in each of Gilbert and Sullivan's long-running comic operas until The Yeoman of the Guard, which closed in 1889. While appearing in the operas, Grossmith continued his piano entertainment career at private parties and matinees, writing and composing his own material. He became the most successful comic entertainer of his day, writing numerous operettas, around 100 piano sketches, some 600 songs and short piano pieces, and 3 books. 6 For Punch magazine in 1884 he provided a series of short sketches based on his experiences as a court reporter at Bow Street Magistrates Court. 4 In 1889, Grossmith ended his connection with Gilbert and Sullivan to pursue his piano sketch career full-time and continued to perform until 1908. He died in 1912. 4. As an artist Weedon Grossmith exhibited at the Royal Academy and at the Grosvenor Gallery. He also contributed illustrations to Punch and the prestigious art journal. He was nevertheless dissatisfied with his financial prospects as an artist, and by 1885 was pursuing an alternative career as an actor. He continued his career on the stage with considerable success until 1918, making his name playing roles he described as cowards, cads and snobs, and as browbeaten small men under the thumb of authority. He wrote several plays, of which The Night of the Party 1901 was his most successful, and from 1894 was engaged in the management of 2 West End theaters. He died in 1919. 4. The literary scholar Peter Morton, who published an annotated edition of the diary in 2009, 7th suggests that many of the events depicted in it were drawn from the brothers' own home experiences, and that Weedon, something of a scapegrace compared with his perfectionist brother, was the model for Lupin. Summary. The diary begins on the 3rd of April of an unstated year, and runs for approximately 15 months. In a short prologue, readers are informed that Charles Pooter and his wife Caroline Carey have just moved to a new home at The Laurels, Brickfield Terrace, Holloway. Mr. Pooter is a City of London clerk with percups, possibly an accountancy or private banking firm, though their business is not explicitly stated. The couple's 20-year-old son William works as a bank clerk in Oldham. The first entries describe the Pooters' daily lives and introduce their particular friends, such as their neighbor Going, the enthusiastic bicyclist Cummings, and the Jameses from Sutton. From the beginning a pattern is set whereby the small vexations of the Pooters' daily lives are recounted, many of them arising from Pooter's unconscious self-importance and pomposity. Trouble with servants, tradesmen, and office juniors occur regularly, along with minor social embarrassments and humiliations. The rare formal social events in the Pooters' lives are particular magnets for misfortune. They receive an invitation from the Lord Mayor of London to attend a ball at the Mansion House for representatives of trade and commerce. After days of keen anticipation they are dismayed, when they arrive, to find that the gathering is undistinguished. Pooter is snobbishly upset to be greeted familiarly by his local ironmonger, even more so when this tradesman appears to be on social terms with some of the more important guests. Pooter overindulges in champagne and humiliates Carey by collapsing on the dance floor. In the summer their son arrives from Oldham and informs his parents that he wishes henceforth to be called by his middle name, Lupin. He has been dismissed from his bank post for idleness. Although dismayed, Pooter sees this as a chance to get his son into percups. Lupin joins the couple for their annual holiday week in Broadstairs, but relationships are strained by Lupin's fast habits. On their return, Pooter's efforts to find Lupin a job at first prove fruitless. The boy is interested in amateur dramatics and joins an organization called the Holloway Comedians. With the help of Pooter's employer Mr. Percup, Lupin finally secures a clerical position with a firm of stockbrokers in November. He then shocks his parents by announcing his engagement. Lupin's fiancée, Daisy Mutlar, is the sister of one of his theatrical friends and is, he says, the nicest, prettiest, and most accomplished girl he ever met. Pooter is disappointed when he meets her. She is a big young woman, at least 8 years older than Lupin. I did not even think her good-looking. Nevertheless, in her honor the Pooters give a large dinner party, to which Pooter invites Mr. Percup. The party becomes boisterous. Mr. Percup arrives at a particularly raucous moment, and decides not to stay. Pooter believes the party has failed, and is despondent, although Carey deems it a great success. However, within a few days, Lupin informs them that the engagement is off. In the following weeks Lupin often brings the Holloway troupe back to The Laurels. These occasions are graced with the unexplained presence of a complete stranger, Mr. Padge, who regularly occupies the best chair as if by right. Lupin opts out of the family's Christmas celebrations, and then announces, to everyone's astonishment, that the engagement to Daisy is back on. Christmas passes happily enough, despite a supper party which degenerates into a food fight instigated by Daisy. In the new year, Pooter is promoted to senior clerk at Percups, and his salary raised by £100 a year, but his achievement is overshadowed by Lupin's announcement that he has just profited by £200 through a timely shares speculation. Lupin persuades his father, and Going and Cummings, to invest small sums in parachica chlorates, the source of his gains. The Pooters meet a new friend of Lupin's, Mr. Murray Posh, who Pooter thinks is somewhat over-familiar with Daisy and might, he warns Lupin, be a rival for her hand. Lupin pooh-poohs this notion. Later, Pooter learns that he and his friends have lost their investment. Indeed, Lupin's stockbroking firm has collapsed entirely and its principal has fled. Lupin is thus unemployed. Worse, that same day the engagement of Daisy Mudlar to Murray Posh is announced. Lupin's only consolation, he tells his father, is that he persuaded Posh to invest £600 in parachica-chlorates. However, in Pooter's eyes the situation is redeemed when Mr. Percup offers Lupin a clerkship. April begins with another social disaster. The Pooters receive an invitation to a ball given by the East Acton Rifle Brigade, which they imagine will be a glittering occasion. It turns out to be shabby and down at heel. Furthermore, having liberally supplied fellow guests, among them Mr. Padge, with food and drink which he thinks is free, Pooter is presented at the end with a large bill that he can barely afford to pay. Other social events also turn sour. A lunch party with Mr. Finsorth, the father of an old friend, is marred by some unfortunate comments by Pooter on the Finsorth family portraits. On another occasion they meet a loud and over-opinionated American, Mr. Hardfur Huddle, who, Pooter realizes, is like a mature version of Lupin. Lupin is sacked from Percups for persuading their top client, Mr. Crowbillon, to take his business to another firm. Pooter is mortified, but the new firm rewards Lupin with a £25 commission and a job at £200 a year. Lupin resumes his friendship with Murray Posh and Daisy, who is now Mrs. Posh. Lupin moves to lodgings in Bayswater, where Pooter and Carrie are invited to dine and where they meet Murray's sister, known as Lily Girl, a woman of around 30. Pooter learns that Murray Posh has settled £10,000 on both Daisy and Lily Girl. Pooter is summoned to meet Hardfur Huddle, who offers Percups a new client to replace Mr. Crowbillon. Percup is so grateful to Pooter for this introduction that he buys up the freehold of the Laurels and presents the deeds to Pooter. As the couple celebrate, a letter arrives from Lupin announcing his engagement to Lily Girl. We shall be married in August, and among our guests we hope to see your old friends Going and Cummings. The diary made its initial appearance as an intermittent serial in the satirical weekly magazine Punch. The first of the 26 installments was announced in the issue of the 26th of May 1888 with a brief editorial note. As everybody who is anybody is publishing reminiscences, diaries, notes, autobiographies, and recollections, we are sincerely grateful to a nobody for permitting us to add to the historic collection. 9th, the diary entry dates are several weeks behind the dates on which they appear in Punch. 10th, the Punch serialization ended in May 1889 with the diary entry for the 21st of March, which records the Pooters and their friends celebrating the minor triumph of Lupin's appointment as a clerk at Percups. 11th, that was the intended end of the diary. However, when the writers were preparing the manuscript for publication as a book, they added a further 4 months entries to the text, and included 26 illustrations by Weedon Grossmith. 8. In June 1892 J.W. Aerosmith Limited published the diary in book form. 8. Although its critical and popular success was not evident until the third edition appeared in October 1910. After the First World War the book's popularity continued to grow. Regular reprintings and new editions ensured that thereafter the book was never out of print. Audiobook versions have been available since 1982. 12. The writer Robert McCrum, in a personal list of the 100 greatest novels of all time, published in the Observer newspaper, listed the diary at number 35. 13. The Spectator, Benny Green points out several parallels with the original, in both character and event. Matthew's book, says Green, is amusing, but the Grossmith's book is superior. It is affecting as well as comical, in a way that the Matthew pastiche is not. 44. In 1982 came the first appearance of Sue Townsend's teenage creation, Adrian Mole, whose passage into young manhood and early middle age is charted in a long series of diaries. The more middle-aged he becomes, says Morton, the more he resembles Pooter. 45. Keith Waterhouse's Mrs. Pooter's Diary of 1983 is an adaptation of the Grossmith original that shifts the narrative voice to Carrie Pooter. 46. In 1996 Helen Fielding used the imaginary diary format for Bridget Jones's Diary, which records the daily paraphernalia of a single woman's life. The New York Times critic wrote that it captures neatly the way modern women teeter between I am woman, independence and a pathetic girly desire to be all things to all men. 47. This diary began as a weekly column in The Independent. In the 1990s the satirical magazine Private Eye lampooned John Major, British Prime Minister 1990-97, in The Secret Diary of John Major aged 473 a hybrid of the Adrian Mole diaries with the Diary of a Nobody, which made much fun of Major's lower middle class origins. 48 and 2. Cockney anglers, Cockney shooters. Murray pashas, lupin pooters. Long and Kensal Green and Highgate silent under soot and stone. From Middlesex, John Betjeman, 1954-50. The social historian James Hamerton defines pooterism as the dependent weakness and inflated social pretension of white-collar workers, constructed in the workplace but expressed just as powerfully at home. 51. John Wilde of The Guardian observes this characteristic in a number of British TV comedy creations of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Captain Mainwaring, Victor Meldrew, and Peep Show's Mark Corrigan are all examples of characters whose blinkered view of themselves is forever in sharp contrast to how they are perceived by the world. 52. Charles Pooter, says Hamerton, was a metaphor for lower middle-class pretension, pomposity and self-importance, set up for mockery by the elites. 41. However, by the mid-20th century changes in the perception of masculine roles in lower middle-class society had stifled the mockery, as men increasingly embraced domesticity. 53. Hamerton remarks that the Grossmiths would surely appreciate the irony in seeing features of the lower middle-class existence they mocked so mercilessly becoming the more universal model for 20th century family life. 54. Bailey remarks on how the poet John Betjeman presented the pooters, not as objects of ridicule but of envy, snug and secure in their suburban retreat. 55. N3.